Nous allons suivre l'intervention de Madame Sheam, Executive Director ITTO.
J'ai pas besoin. Pourquoi est-ce que c'est moi qui suis là-bas à l'écran? Je suis en train de télécharger. Ah d'accord. Ah voilà, d'accord. Tu peux avancer les diapos là. Non, dis-lui qu'elle fasse comme ça, quand elle voit que c'est vers la diapo.
Madame la Présidente, Monsieur CEO of the ATIBT, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for giving me the privilege and the honor of being here with you. And I have to apologize in advance. My French is terrible, so I won't even attempt to speak French, but I promise to go slow in English, and I will take you through these slides that I have very, very quickly. Oh, okay. I just do that. I better get the right thing about.
No, you're gonna.
Just make sure it's facing the right way, okay? Sorry, geez. Well, can I also begin by thanking everyone for the lovely evening yesterday, actually. It was nice, huh? It was so nice.
Bon,
And
sinon,
it's great being amongst very great people in the club. As you know, I used to work in the private sector in Europe with the New Regional Council, and I now belong to the International Cooperative Organization. I belong to them, yes, based in Japan. You might want to know who the ITTO
je l'ai ici, sinon c'est pas grave. Je vais le faire. Je peux le
But
faire.
the reason I agreed to speak to all of you this morning is just to reinforce what the Honorable
Mais elle va
Minister
pas le télécommander sur mon ordi.
and also what the Honorable Don mentioned in her opening speech, followed through also by Kate from the NC. The ITTO's mandate, of course, is to show the true value of tropical forests. We have a 74-member international organization. Hello.
Non, 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 non.
Let me just click on through.
Just a moment.
Let me just go again. One more. Oh. Next.
No, 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 sorry. Just a moment. I need.
So we are a 74-member intergovernmental organization, headquartered with greater support from the government of Japan. And we have a 50-50 divide between producing countries and consuming countries, which is quite nice. I mean, 74 is less than half of the United Nations members, so to speak. But the consumption markets that are involved inside the membership of the ITTO do practically cover global consumption of wood products, because they include large members such as the EU, China, the US, India, and for the producing countries, ITTO membership covers 45% of the tropical, ITTO's membership accounts for 45% of the global forests. So almost 50% of global forests worldwide. And ITTO membership also accounts for 90% of the international trade in forests and wood products. So that is significant. So we have the largest producer in Indonesia, Malaysia, and more countries also in the Congo Basin, such as Cameroon, Republic of Congo, Gabon, and we also have the hybrid countries who are producers and consumers. We were having an interesting conversation this morning about this, i.e. India, Vietnam, China. who are not strictly producers or consumers as such. So I think, the ITTO membership might have to take a little bit in years to come. Now, we are living in unprecedented times and we're facing unprecedented challenges. So the biggest elephant in the room so far is the Ukraine and Russia conflict situation. In the last 3 months, in all the international meetings that Madame and I have attended, not many people actually addressed this. I'm not sure whether people are nervous to talk about it, although I think it's quite clear what can be predicted in terms of the disruption that it will cause to trade flows, consumption, and production. And there are a number of question marks also. Thank you. Just leave it here for a second. There are a number of question marks also in what will happen to the forest areas simply because of all the sanctions that have been placed on Russia and Belarus. I can answer some of that later on. So this is the Ukraine and Russia war. So we have FSC and PSC certification. Both teams have done the right thing of declaring sources from these areas as conflict timber. But at the same time, by doing that, not all countries have completely banned the imports coming in via Russia and also from Belarus. Some have taken strict economic sanctions, but it always takes time for economic sanctions to work, at least that's in my experience. So in this instance, sure, the payment systems may stop, the sources of supply will stop coming, but what happens then, and what do countries do to address that shortfall? In my simplistic mind, it can increase rates of deforestation in many different parts of the world, including the temperate and boreal areas. So for the last 4 decades, the focus has always been on tropical regions. What is coming now may not just affect tropical countries. So it's quite nice in one way that that coin is being flipped, so that then, mankind, people like us, we learn how to be a bit more realistic in terms of our consumption and production patterns. Okay, so I don't normally stick to my slide, I'm sorry to say, but there are about 20 that are in this PPT, and a lot of them contain some very good background information. So please take it home and do go through them and click on the links, everyone, because the links will provide you with all the detailed information that you need. The whole purpose of these standing here today is just to quickly give you a grasp of what it is that we are up against in the coming months to come. Okay? Can we get the slides, please? Next one. Now, I talked about the sanctions already. Next. More. Okay, we also have the Shanghai lockdown. And now, after maybe sometimes close to 2 months of that market being disrupted, it has created ripples in every other part of the world too. Because as we know, the shipping lanes to and from China are the ones that controls global shipping. And we have heard from the private sector through our market information service that freight rates have now accelerated or been compounded by at least 10 times the usual rates. When I used to work for the private sector, we used to see this cycle every year. Just before Chinese New Year, Mark is always smiling, you already know. Just before Chinese New Year, for about 6 weeks, you see the freight rates racing up and down like no tomorrow. But then it cycles. A month after Chinese New Year, all the ships come back into service. But what are we seeing now? The ships are not coming back into service because of COVID. There has been a lot of consolidation in almost every sector that we can think of, which has then created a number of issues for producers, for consumers, for manufacturing, for value adding, for distribution, transportation, and it has had also huge impact on labor, and I dare say on the sustainable management of public profiles. I dare say that, because as far as we know to date, the impact on the ground in the forest itself has not been huge. The biggest difference is the felling rates have reduced because of strict movement controls and restricted entry into forest areas. But the actual percentage of illegality and illegal logging, so far to my knowledge, ladies and gentlemen, from what we hear from our market consultants and our consultants, it has not been terrible. Everybody expected it to race through the roof. and increase maybe by 5 to 10 times what it usually is because of a lack of governance or a lack of checking or a lack of everything. But so far, if any of you have information that is different to that, please let us know. We're very interested to hear what is actually happening. But so far, still good. Sure, there has been increases in some parts of the world, definitely. I'm not saying that that inequality has remained at 0%. No, far from that. But it has not increased to the extent that it was expected to increase. Next, please. Next slide, please.
Oh.
Uh,
Yeah, it's blocked.
you-
Ouais. Voilà. This one.
So I talked about the rates going up and all the unexpected developments. Well, actually, they were predictable and expected. But like I said, many markets always take time to adapt. And at this stage, I think this is the slowest process of adaptation we have seen in the last 2 decades. And I'm not sure why that is. I think it's because of COVID again, because the world kind of slowed down. So 2 years of lack of being on top of things, and suddenly you hit the wall with the conflict situation, and markets are taking time to wake up and change the way they do things and change the way they live. Next slide, please. So, in addition to all of that, of course, again, we have market models that are in place. I mean, these have been developing in the last 3 decades. So we're quite used to all this. We're quite used to different markets coming up with different requirements, which is fair, of course, because we've always said whatever kind of market regulation that is needed to be put in place in the hope that it improves the market situation or the production and consumption factors, it has to be fair and even. That has always been a struggle. It has been a very difficult process in trying to ensure the viability of market requirements and as to whether they are potentially successful or whether they can be a failure. You have seen mixed results with many different regulations that have been put in place over the years. With the producing countries that have stronger market share, they normally fare a lot better because they put a lot of effort into addressing the requirements through these regulations. But for the weaker markets or those that do not have the resources, because hey, let's face it, certification, legality assurance, monitoring of forests, the implementation of sustainable forest management, you need human, financial, and also intelligence resources to be able to do that successfully. And unfortunately, that doesn't fall free from the sky. Unfortunately, it costs a lot of resources. I mean, coming from a producing country myself, I know how much effort Malaysia put into this. And she was one country that I'm proud to say that did not have to take assistance or rely on assistance in order to be able to proceed, which is why it makes me really proud that Madame Otondo now has announced this morning on the measures that are being taken by the Republic of Congo. And we also know that Gabon is also extremely committed to these processes. We have seen other tropical producing countries also come up in leaps and bounds over the years, such as Brazil, Indonesia, many other countries actually. It's time that all countries aim to do their best to achieve the market share that you need in order to enrich your own people and your own country. So with these legislative moves, fair enough, they can have the impact that is wished for, but the consumer markets also need to play their part in supporting the implementation of the regulations and ensuring unfettered market. Because when market access is effective, it disincentivizes and demotivates anyone to do anything. So I'm not sure sometimes whether that is the hidden agenda to make markets to be self-sufficient. Is that possible? I don't know, Can the EU be self-sufficient? Can China be self-sufficient? I think all of you know the answer there. Yeah. Okay. Let's go. Deforestation-free market legislation. Next slide, please. With the latest one, you see, so we've done this little table to just show you what each of them has been asking for and what is it that is expected, which is fine, except Can we go to the next one? The deforestation free and the concept of due diligence, even this keeps evolving. It keeps changing. Now, you know, when two parties are in a discussion over anything, it can be marriage, it can be, I don't know, a commercial contract. You need fair terms, correct? The minute one of you feel that you're being cheated, or the minute one of you feel that the goalpost is being moved, would you move forward with it? I know I wouldn't. Neither would you, right? So this is what we have seen happening quite a lot. You know, the expectations, you know, before conditions are met, the expectations and the bar is raised. That's not right. It's not fair. Because like I said, it's not a cheap process, it's not a free process. It takes time. It takes time to change. Mental perception is one thing. When Madam Minister mentioned earlier about negative perception on tropical timber, how, you know, 30 years later, people still thinking negatively about tropical timber? Why? I can't see why. They've got the best hardwoods, the best resources, and to stop them from trying to develop their own countries is also wrong. Because in my perspective, being at an international organization right now, and also in my previous career for 25 years, is very clear. If you do not give the forest the value that it deserves, you will be a driver for deforestation. Am I right? It's common sense. If you don't earn money from the space that the forest is occupying, it's common sense that countries switch that to a far more beneficial economic use, which is what we have seen happening in the last 50 years. And it looks to me as if some of the measures that are being discussed right now may have exactly that impact. I don't know yet, neither do any of us for that matter, but it can be counterproductive. And it would be horrible to see in 10 years' time, some parties admitting or saying, damn, we made a mistake. By this time, we will have maybe 10% of forests left in the whole world. We are 30% right now of land cover. So in the next 10 years, depending on what happens in the next 10 years, we could be fine by 2030. And everyone is talking about climate change. What are we doing to put forests at the center of that? So that's our job, you see. That's our job as IT people. If any of you wondered what ITTO actually does. Like I said, we are at the minute trying to reinforce the strength and the value of forests to be at the center of being effective solutions to climate change mitigation and adaptation. Madame has also been to several international attended the same meeting. So we can speak at different fora, key in the same messages, so that we hope it will agree, because you know, the other thing is people at the same meetings, oh, there's 20 billion euros spent. Billion? 20 billion? I don't talk in such big numbers, everyone. And I come from a very, very humble family. I have a very humble job also. When someone mentions a million to me, that's already big bucks. Now you're talking about 20 billion. And what we're trying to find out is where would this funding go? What will it do? We know who's putting it in, but it's still not clear how it will be spent and how that will be applied. So the messages that we're trying to reinforce is, in order to try and save tropical forestry, for an organization like the ITTO, we can do so much on the ground because that is what ITTO has done for the last 3.5 decades of its existence. They have a lot of good, successful projects that can be replicated and upscaled. This is what everyone is talking about. You know, the climate change people are talking about this. The United Nations Forum on Forests is talking about this also. They want projects that can be scaled up, that can be made into regional projects, that can be turned into transboundary projects. We've done all that before. And all they need to do is decide on which approach they wish to take. You want to do the landscape approach? You want to do the concession approach? Needs to be negotiated, of course, with member countries. And somebody needs to put the bucks in. That's where it's lacking at this point. There's no clear direction in which that funding will go. So the 20 billion is on the one. The GE actually, they have 500 million unspent funds in their bank. I don't know what the World Bank stuff was. I don't understand. I don't know. You know, to build an annual program or an investment program, that's got something like 700 million sitting at the World Bank unspent. It's time for the private sector to start questioning, asking, how do we do this? Because everybody wants private sector to be involved. That's all of you, right? You have the means of doing it. Private sector is always innovative, you're always quick. Being at the ITTO and having done this before, we work with private sector too and the government authorities. So in the perfect position to help you implement this, if only you can convince the parties on what investment is needed to make the clock turn towards the direction of 2030 in America. Right? So we have to really balance this and get something going in the next 2 or 3 years, or we will never meet the 2030 deadline. You know? Can you keep swinging the slides, please? So that's all the impact. And then we've had the flag process, of course. Please turn again. Yeah, okay. So you see, ITTO has been helping the EU to implement the IMM element from the flag process. But now, sadly, we hear that this whole process is coming to an end because they are switching off. They're turning off the switch on the flag process, and they're turning on the switch on the commodity regulation. So I'm sorry, I'm not the brightest bulb in the room, but I'm not dim either. But I can't quite see the rationale behind it. Maybe I'm thick, you know, yeah, I could be that I'm thick, but I can't see the rationale and the balance between the aims of the commodity regulation versus the investments that have gone into the flagged PPA process, where a number of countries did plow in resources to try and make it work. And now they're sitting on this rock somewhere with water around them, thinking, how do we get out of this now? There is no getting out, that's the point. And so it's really good news to hear that countries are making use of the lessons learned in that process to see if they can find a convincing way to continue the trade in the world. You know? Can we swing anything? So COVID-19, I don't have to tell you how, can you just see? So this was the stakeholder consultation inputs that we have from that IMM process. Please read it at home. It's nothing that you don't already know. Same thing with the COVID-19 and the timber markets. We did a breakdown of a very brief summary of what happened in the EU27. Swing, please, in the US, China, and Vietnam. Please swing the slides. Another one, please. Okay, so you know all of this already because being private sector, you're always on top of all this. So I don't want to waste your time by making you listen to all this again. And the next one tells you roughly a little bit of what ITTO has done in helping our members and the private sector through our trade advisory group during COVID-19. So please look at the publications on the ITTO's website because they are real time. Every 2 weeks they are refreshed, so that's kind of real time where the wood sector is concerned for the latest market development and the impact on private supply and demand. Next one, please. More, keep going. So we've got the program lines and it all ties in with what all of us are hearing and with what all of us need to do. So we've got 4 big ones, and ITTO is transitioning now to a pilot phase of testing the program lines in terms of fundraising. It's still a bit too soon to say whether the pilot fundraising will actually work or not. So we have 12 months into it. We have another 12 months to go to see if our donors actually bite the bullet that they put us in. We'll see. The main one that is very popular at this point, next slide please, is the Legal and Sustainable Supply Chain Program, the LFSE program. So this has a kind of a continuity because different donors are pitching into this one. This can work very well with what is actually happening now in terms of international developments, either in terms of certification of forests or in terms of traceability, in terms of supply chains, where our focus is on legal and sustainable supply chain. In other words, sustainably managed and sustainable in terms of production. So sustainable from 2 different interpretations, if you like, right? So that's what we are aiming at. And I firmly believe that this particular program has got excellent potential to take us towards the 2030 deadline. If we work together with all the parties, and if the parties have trusted the ITTO to help you deliver on this one. Moving forward, the key elements I've already mentioned in the early part of my conversation with you. We need the strategic investments. We need the industry also. ITTO is very good at capacity building and training. We believe that education lies at the root of all of this. We work very closely with other international organizations like the FAO, IUPO, C4. We are part of a collaborative partnership on forests, basically. So there are 15 international intergovernmental organizations that work together, and we work with the governments in our member countries to make sure that we have a coherent way forward. At the end of all this, you know, as I said, valuing the forest is one thing, but if you kill the trade in forest and wood products, that's another surefire fire to see all forests disappear off the face. It's not something that we should do as communities. With that, I welcome any questions or any comments or thoughts. Thank you very much for listening.